Sophia Chen stared at her laptop screen in complete disbelief, her coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips. The email she had just opened contained only 7 words, but those 7 words shattered what should have been the most beautiful morning of her life. Photos deleted due to non-payment. Lesson learned, Marcus. But what Marcus Blackwood didn't know was that Sophia owned Aperture Studios, the very facility where he rented all his professional equipment. And she had just discovered something in his rental history that would change everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The rain tapped gently against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Sophia's downtown Seattle apartment, creating a rhythmic backdrop to what should have been a morning of pure joy. At 32, Sophia had built a successful career as a senior software engineer at one of the city's most innovative tech startups. And exactly 1 week ago, she had married the love of her life, David Park, in what everyone had described as the most beautiful wedding they had ever attended. The ceremony had taken place at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel, with its stunning crystal chandeliers and elegant ballroom overlooking Elliott Bay. Every detail had been meticulously planned, from the cascading white orchids that adorned each table to the string quartet that had played during the ceremony. Sophia's Korean mother had flown in from Los Angeles, bringing with her traditional hanbok dresses for the tea ceremony, while David's Irish family had arrived from Boston, carrying with them generations of wedding customs and an infectious enthusiasm for celebration. For months, Sophia had dreamed about this morning. She had imagined sitting in her favorite reading chair, wrapped in her softest cashmere sweater, scrolling through hundreds of photographs that would capture every precious moment of their wedding day. She had envisioned seeing herself walking down the aisle in her grandmother's vintage pearl necklace, her face radiant with happiness as she approached David at the altar. She had pictured the candid shots of their families laughing together during the reception, the intimate moments during their first dance, and the pure joy on everyone's faces as they celebrated late into the evening. Instead, she was staring at an email that felt like a punch to the stomach, followed by a wave of confusion so intense that she wondered if she was still dreaming. Marcus Blackwood had been recommended to them by the wedding planner at the Fairmont, described as one of Seattle's most talented and sought-after wedding photographers. His portfolio had been stunning, filled with images that captured not just the events of wedding days but the emotions, the connections, the fleeting moments that made each celebration unique. During their initial consultation 6 months earlier, Marcus had impressed both Sophia and David with his artistic vision and his apparent understanding of their desire for photographs that would reflect both of their cultural backgrounds. He had spoken eloquently about the importance of documenting not just the traditional American wedding elements, but also the Korean tea ceremony and the Irish blessing that they planned to incorporate into their celebration. Marcus had quoted them a price of $8,000 for full wedding day coverage, including an engagement session, 8 hours of wedding day photography, and a custom-designed photo album. It was more than Sophia had initially budgeted for photography, but David had convinced her that their wedding photos would be the only tangible memories they would have of their special day, and that investing in quality photography was worth stretching their budget. They had signed the contract in March, paid a deposit of $4,000 immediately, and had agreed to pay the remaining balance within 30 days of receiving their final edited photographs. Marcus had explained that his typical turnaround time was 4 to 6 weeks, which had seemed perfectly reasonable to Sophia, who understood from her work in tech that quality creative work required adequate time and attention to detail. The engagement session had taken place in April at the Kubota Garden, a hidden gem in South Seattle that featured traditional Japanese landscaping and provided a stunning backdrop for photographs. Marcus had been professional and creative during the shoot, directing them through various poses, while also capturing candid moments of them walking through the gardens and laughing together on the wooden bridges that spanned the carefully maintained ponds. When they had received the engagement photos 2 weeks later, Sophia had been thrilled with the results. Marcus had captured something magical in his images, a quality of light and emotion that made even the simplest moments look like scenes from a romantic film. The photographs had exceeded her expectations, and she had felt confident that they had chosen the right photographer for their wedding day. The wedding day itself had gone exactly as planned. Marcus had arrived at the hotel at noon, just as they had discussed, and had immediately begun photographing the preparation process. He had captured Sophia getting ready with her bridesmaids, the traditional Korean tea ceremony with her parents, and the emotional moment when David had first seen her in her wedding dress. Throughout the day, Marcus had been unobtrusive but thorough, seeming to anticipate important moments before they happened and positioning himself to capture them perfectly. During the reception, Marcus had continued to document every significant moment. He had photographed the traditional Irish toast that David's father had given, the moment when Sophia's mother had presented them with a traditional Korean wedding duck, and the impromptu dance performance that David's teenage cousins had surprised them with during dinner. As the evening had progressed, Sophia had occasionally noticed Marcus working around the periphery of the celebration, his camera capturing the laughter, the tears of joy, and the spontaneous moments of connection between their families and friends. At the end of the night, as Sophia and David had prepared to leave for their suite upstairs, Marcus had approached them to confirm the timeline for delivering their photographs. He had explained that he would spend the next several weeks carefully editing their images, and that they could expect to receive a link to their online gallery within 4 to 6 weeks. He had also reminded them that the final payment would be due within 30 days of receiving the photographs, just as outlined in their original contract. Sophia had been so exhausted and happy that night that she had barely processed the details of their conversation with Marcus. She had simply nodded and thanked him for his beautiful work throughout the day, confident that everything would proceed smoothly and that she would soon have stunning photographs to commemorate their perfect wedding. The honeymoon in Santorini had been everything they had dreamed of and more. They had spent 10 days exploring the island, sampling local wines, watching breathtaking sunsets from their hotel terrace, and simply enjoying being newlyweds. Sophia had occasionally thought about their wedding photos during quiet moments, wondering what Marcus was creating in his editing process and looking forward to reliving their special day through his artistic lens. When they had returned to Seattle, they had been immediately swept back into their normal routines. David had returned to his job as a financial analyst at a downtown investment firm, while Sophia had jumped back into a complex software development project that required her full attention and long hours at the office. Between adjusting to married life, catching up on work, and managing the various thank you notes and administrative tasks that followed any major life event, the weeks had passed quickly. It had been exactly 4 weeks since their wedding when Sophia had started checking her email more frequently, looking for the message from Marcus that would contain the link to their wedding photographs. When the 4-week mark had passed without any communication, she had decided to give him a few more days, understanding that creative work didn't always adhere to strict timelines and that quality was more important than speed. By the 5-week mark, however, Sophia had begun to feel slightly anxious about the delay. She had sent Marcus a polite email inquiring about the status of their photographs and requesting an updated timeline for delivery. His response had been brief but reassuring, explaining that he was putting the finishing touches on their gallery and that they could expect to receive their photographs within the next week. When that week had passed without any further communication, Sophia had called Marcus directly. The phone call had been awkward and unsatisfying, with Marcus seeming distracted and offering vague explanations about technical difficulties and the complexity of editing their particular set of images. He had promised that their photographs would be ready within the next few days, and had asked for their patience as he worked to deliver the highest quality results possible. 2 more weeks had passed before Sophia had received any additional communication from Marcus, and when his email had finally arrived, it had not contained the gallery link she had been expecting. Instead, Marcus had sent a brief message explaining that there had been a delay due to equipment issues, and that he needed an additional 2 weeks to complete their photographs. He had apologized for the inconvenience and had assured them that the wait would be worth it when they saw the final results. At this point, Sophia had begun to feel genuinely concerned about the situation. It had been nearly 8 weeks since their wedding, well beyond the timeline that Marcus had originally promised, and his communication had become increasingly infrequent and vague. When she had tried calling his studio number, she had reached only a voicemail system, and her messages had gone unreturned. David had tried to reassure her that delays were probably normal in the photography business, and that Marcus's reputation for quality work meant that he was likely just being a perfectionist about their images. But Sophia's experience in the tech industry had taught her that communication and project management were just as important as technical skills, and Marcus's handling of their project was beginning to raise red flags. It had been 10 weeks after their wedding when Sophia had decided to take a more direct approach. She had driven to the address listed on Marcus's business cards, which turned out to be a small commercial building in the Fairmont neighborhood that housed several creative businesses. When she had arrived at the suite number associated with Marcus's studio, however, she had found an empty office with a for lease sign in the window. Confused and increasingly worried, Sophia had spoken with the building manager, who had explained that Marcus had vacated the space 6 weeks earlier, citing financial difficulties and a need to downsize his operations. The building manager had provided Sophia with a forwarding address, but when she had driven to that location, she had discovered that it was merely a UPS store mailbox, not an actual studio or office. This discovery had prompted Sophia to conduct more thorough research into Marcus's business and background. What she had found had been deeply troubling. Online reviews of Marcus's work had been mixed at best, with several recent clients complaining about delayed deliveries, poor communication, and, in some cases, complete failure to deliver promised photographs. Some reviewers had mentioned difficulties reaching Marcus after their events, and others had described having to threaten legal action to receive their images. Even more concerning had been Sophia's discovery that Marcus's business license had been suspended 3 months earlier due to multiple. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Complaints filed with the Better Business Bureau. The complaints had ranged from breach of contract to failure to deliver services as promised, and the pattern of behavior described in these reports had been remarkably similar to what Sophia was experiencing. Armed with this information, Sophia had sent Marcus a firm but professional email demanding immediate delivery of their wedding photographs and threatening legal action if he failed to respond within 48 hours. She had also CC'd David on the email and had included references to the business license suspension and the negative reviews she had discovered online. Marcus's response had arrived within hours, but instead of the apologetic explanation and immediate photo delivery that Sophia had been hoping for, his email had been defensive and hostile. He had accused Sophia of being unreasonable and impatient, had claimed that his artistic process could not be rushed, and had suggested that clients who couldn't appreciate the time required for quality work should hire mall photographers instead of true artists. More troubling still, Marcus had demanded payment of the remaining $4,000 balance before he would release any photographs, despite the fact that their original contract clearly stated that payment was due within 30 days of photo delivery, not before. He had also added a late fee of $500, claiming that the delay in payment had caused him financial hardship and that this fee was standard industry practice. Sophia had been incredulous at Marcus's demands and his complete misrepresentation of their contractual agreement. She had immediately responded with a detailed email outlining the terms of their original contract, including scanned copies of the relevant pages, and had demanded immediate photo delivery according to their agreed-upon terms. She had also made it clear that she would not be paying any additional fees or paying the balance before receiving the photographs as originally agreed. What had followed had been a series of increasingly hostile emails from Marcus, each one more unreasonable than the last. He had accused Sophia of trying to steal his work, had threatened to delete their photographs if she continued to harass him, and had made vague references to having other clients who appreciated his artistic vision and treated him with the respect he deserved. The final email in this exchange had been the most shocking of all. Marcus had informed Sophia that he was implementing a new business policy requiring full payment before photo delivery, and that this policy would be applied retroactively to all outstanding contracts, including theirs. He had given Sophia 48 hours to pay the full balance plus late fees, totaling $4,500, or he would consider their contract void and would delete their photographs to free up storage space for paying clients. Sophia had been so stunned by this ultimatum that she had immediately called David at work to read him the email. David had been equally shocked and had left his office early to come home and discuss their options. They had spent the evening researching their legal rights and trying to determine the best course of action. Their research had confirmed what Sophia had suspected. Marcus's demands were completely unreasonable and likely illegal. According to the original contract, which they had both signed, payment was due after delivery, not before. Marcus had no legal right to demand payment in advance or to add arbitrary late fees, and his threat to delete their photographs could potentially constitute breach of contract or even extortion. David had wanted to contact a lawyer immediately, but Sophia had convinced him to try one more direct approach first. She had crafted a carefully worded email explaining their position, referencing the specific terms of their contract and making it clear that Marcus's threats were legally questionable. She had also offered a compromise. If Marcus would deliver their photographs immediately, they would pay the original balance within the agreed-upon 30-day timeline, but they would not pay any additional ralliteur fees or charges that had not been part of their original agreement. Marcus's response to this reasonable offer had been swift and brutal. He had sent a single-line email: "Photos deleted due to non-payment. Lesson learned, Marcus." The timestamp on the email indicated that he had sent it less than 2 hours after receiving Sophia's message, suggesting that he had not given any serious consideration to her proposal or to the legal implications of his actions. Now, sitting in her apartment on what should have been a joyful morning of reminiscing about their wedding day, Sophia felt a mixture of rage, disbelief, and heartbreak that was unlike anything she had ever experienced. The photographs from their wedding day were irreplaceable. They represented not just memories of a single event, but documentation of a milestone that marked the beginning of their life together. The images would have captured moments with grandparents who might not be alive for future family celebrations, expressions of joy and love from friends and family members, and details of a day that they had spent months planning and thousands of dollars creating. More than the financial loss, though, was the emotional devastation of knowing that these memories were gone forever. Sophia thought about her grandmother, who had flown in from Korea specifically for the wedding despite her failing health. She thought about David's grandfather, who had given a touching speech about love and commitment that had brought tears to everyone's eyes. She thought about the spontaneous moment when her young nephew had approached them during the reception to ask if he could have the first dance with his new aunt, and about the expression of pure happiness on David's face when he had seen her walking down the aisle. All of these moments, which Marcus had captured through his lens, were now gone forever because of his greed, his unprofessionalism, and his complete disregard for the emotional significance of what he had been hired to document. The violation felt personal in a way that Sophia had never experienced, as if Marcus had deliberately destroyed something precious and irreplaceable simply because he could. As Sophia sat staring at Marcus's callous email, her initial shock began to transform into something else entirely. She was not the type of person who accepted injustice quietly, and her experience in the competitive tech industry had taught her that sometimes the best defense was a strategic offense. Marcus had made a critical error in his assumption that Sophia was just another powerless client who would accept his abuse and move on. What Marcus didn't know was that Sophia's success in the tech industry had allowed her to make several strategic investments in Seattle's creative community. 2 years earlier, she had purchased Aperture Studios, a high-end equipment rental facility that served photographers, videographers, and other creative professionals throughout the Pacific Northwest. The investment had been both financial and personal for Sophia, who had always been passionate about photography as a hobby and had wanted to support the local creative community. Aperture Studios was located in a converted warehouse in the Georgetown neighborhood, and it housed thousands of dollars worth of professional cameras, lenses, lighting equipment, and other specialized gear that local photographers could rent for their projects. The facility had an excellent reputation among Seattle's creative professionals, and it served many of the city's most successful photographers and videographers. As the owner of Aperture Studios, Sophia had access to detailed rental records for all of their clients, including information about what equipment they rented, when they rented it, and their payment history. She also had relationships with many of the photographers who used the facility, and she was well connected within Seattle's creative community. Sophia walked over to her home office and opened her laptop to access the Aperture Studios database. She typed Marcus Blackwood's name into the search function, and what she discovered made her blood pressure spike even higher. Marcus was indeed a regular client of Aperture Studios, and his rental history painted a picture that was completely at odds with his claims of financial hardship and artistic integrity. According to the records, Marcus had rented over $15,000 worth of equipment from Aperture Studios in the past year alone. He regularly rented high-end camera bodies, premium lenses, professional lighting systems, and specialized accessories that were far beyond what most photographers could afford to own outright. His rental frequency suggested that he was running a substantial photography business, not the struggling artistic operation that he had portrayed in his emails to Sophia. Even more revealing was Marcus's payment history with Aperture Studios. While he had never been more than a few days late with his rental payments, the record showed a pattern of last-minute payments and occasional requests for payment extensions that suggested cash flow problems. More significantly, the records indicated that Marcus had recently increased his rental frequency, taking on more equipment for longer periods, which suggested that he was either expanding his business or struggling to keep up with demand using his existing gear. As Sophia scrolled through Marcus's rental history, she began to see a pattern that made her stomach churn. Many of his recent rentals had coincided with wedding dates, and the equipment he was renting was specifically suited for wedding photography. It appeared that Marcus was building his wedding photography business largely on rented equipment, which meant that his overhead costs were substantial and his profit margins were likely much smaller than clients realized. This discovery led Sophia to a troubling conclusion. Marcus's demand for advance payment wasn't about artistic integrity or standard business practices. It was about cash flow problems that were forcing him to collect payment before delivering work in order to cover his ongoing equipment rental costs. He was essentially using new clients' payments to fund his ability to serve those clients, which was a financially unsustainable business model that put all of his clients at risk. But the most damning discovery in Marcus's rental records was what Sophia found when she looked at his account status. Despite his regular use of Aperture Studios equipment, Marcus's account was currently showing a past due balance of $2,300, representing equipment that he had rented for a wedding 3 weeks earlier, but had not yet returned or paid for. According to the rental agreement, equipment was due back within 48 hours of the rental period's end, and payment was due within 7 days. Marcus had violated both of these terms, and under Aperture Studios' standard policies, his account should have been suspended until the outstanding balance was resolved. However, due to the volume of his rentals and his generally reliable payment history, the studio manager had been allowing Marcus to continue renting equipment while working with him to resolve the overdue balance. Sophia realized that she was looking at a photographer who was essentially operating his business on borrowed time and borrowed equipment. His financial problems were clearly more serious than he had let on to his clients, and his increasingly desperate behavior with Sophia and David was likely being repeated with other couples who were waiting for their wedding photographs. This discovery crystallized something for Sophia that went beyond her personal grievance with Marcus. As the owner of Aperture Studios, she had a responsibility to protect other members of Seattle's creative community from being taken advantage of by someone who was abusing the trust and flexibility that the studio had shown him. More importantly, she had the power to ensure that Marcus could no longer victimize other couples the way he had victimized her and David. Sophia reached for her phone and dialed the direct number for Janet Rodriguez, the general manager of Aperture Studios. Janet had been running the day-to-day operations of the facility since before Sophia had purchased it, and she had developed strong relationships with most of their regular clients. Janet was also known for her no-nonsense approach to business and her fierce protection of the studio's reputation and standards. "Janet, it's Sophia," she said when the manager answered. "I need to talk to you about Marcus Blackwood and his account status. Are you free to discuss this privately?" Janet's tone immediately became more serious. "Of course, Sophia. I've actually been meaning to call you about Marcus's situation. His overdue balance is becoming a real problem, and I'm starting to get concerned about his business practices." Sophia felt a surge of validation hearing Janet's concerns. "Janet, I need you to know that Marcus was my wedding photographer, and he's just deleted all of our wedding photos because we refused to pay him in advance, which wasn't part of our original contract. I think we need to take a much closer look at how he's been operating his business and whether we want to continue supporting it." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Janet responded. "Sophia, I'm so sorry to hear about your wedding photos. That's absolutely unacceptable behavior. And it explains some of the things I've been hearing from other photographers about Marcus's reputation. Can you come in this afternoon? I think we need to have a detailed conversation about this situation and figure out the best way to handle it." Sophia agreed to meet Janet at Aperture Studios that afternoon, and as she hung up the phone, she felt the first glimmer of hope she had experienced since reading Marcus's devastating email. While she might never be able to recover her wedding photographs, she could potentially prevent Marcus from destroying other couples' memories and dreams. And if Marcus thought he could threaten and abuse his clients without consequences, he was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. The drive to Georgetown took Sophia through some of Seattle's most vibrant neighborhoods, past coffee shops and art galleries, and small businesses that represented the creative energy that had drawn her to invest in Aperture Studios in the first place. As she navigated the familiar streets, Sophia found herself thinking about all of the other couples who might be going through exactly what she and David were experiencing, and about the photographers and other creative professionals who were probably suffering because of Marcus's unprofessional behavior. By the time she pulled into the parking lot at Aperture Studios, Sophia had moved beyond anger and heartbreak into something more focused and determined. Marcus had made the mistake of targeting someone who had both the resources and the connections to fight back, and he was about to discover that some battles were more costly than he had anticipated. Janet was waiting for Sophia in the studio's main office, surrounded by rental contracts and account records that she had pulled in preparation for their meeting. Janet was a woman in her 50s, with short gray hair and an understated efficiency that masked a sharp business mind and an even sharper intuition about people and their motivations. "Sophia, before we talk about Marcus specifically, I want you to know how sorry I am about what happened with your wedding photos," Janet said as soon as Sophia sat down. "No couple should have to go through what you're dealing with, and no photographer should be allowed to operate the way Marcus has been operating." Sophia appreciated Janet's directness and her obvious understanding of the gravity of the situation. "Janet, I need to understand the full scope of Marcus's relationship with Aperture Studios and whether there are other clients who might be in similar situations. I also need to know what our options are for addressing his account status and his behavior." Janet opened the file folder in front of her and pulled out several pages of rental records and payment history. "Marcus has been a client for about 18 months, and during that time, he's rented equipment for approximately 40 weddings and other events. His rental volume has been increasing steadily, which initially seemed like a positive sign of a growing business. However, his payment patterns have also become increasingly erratic, and we've had to work with him several times to resolve overdue balances." Sophia studied the records that Janet had prepared, noting the increasing frequency of rentals and the corresponding increase in late payments and payment extensions. "Have you heard from any other clients about problems with Marcus's work or delivery?" Janet nodded grimly. "Actually, yes. About 6 weeks ago, I had a bride call here looking for Marcus because she couldn't reach him at his studio number, and she was worried about her wedding photos. She had heard that he rented equipment from us and hoped we might have current contact information. When I asked her about the situation, she described delays and communication problems that sound very similar to what you've experienced." This revelation confirmed Sophia's suspicions that her situation with Marcus was not isolated, and that other couples were likely suffering similar treatment. "Janet, what are our options for addressing Marcus's current account status and preventing him from continuing to operate this way?" Janet consulted another set of documents before responding. "Under our standard rental agreement, clients who have overdue balances exceeding 14 days are supposed to have their accounts suspended until the balance is resolved. We've been more flexible with Marcus because of his rental volume, but given what you're telling me about his business practices, I think we need to reconsider that approach." Sophia felt a sense of strategic clarity beginning to emerge. What would happen if we suspended Marcus's account right now? How would that affect his ability to fulfill commitments to current clients? "Well," Janet said, checking the rental calendar on her computer, "Marcus has equipment reserved for 3 weddings this weekend and 2 more next weekend. If we suspended his account, he wouldn't be able to pick up that equipment, which would leave him unable to photograph those events unless he could find alternative equipment sources. The implications of this information were significant. If Marcus was as dependent on Aperture Studios' equipment as his rental history suggested, losing access to the facility would effectively shut down his wedding photography business. While Sophia didn't want to harm innocent couples who had hired Marcus for upcoming events, she also couldn't allow him to continue operating in a way that put more clients at risk. "Janet, I think we need to approach this strategically," Sophia said after considering the various options. "We can't cut off his access to equipment in a way that would harm couples who have already hired him for upcoming weddings, but we also can't continue enabling his abusive behavior toward clients. Is there a way we can leverage his dependence on our equipment to force him to address the way he's been treating his clients?" Janet smiled slightly, recognizing the business acumen that had made Sophia successful in the tech industry. "Actually, there might be. Our rental agreement includes clauses about professional conduct and business practices that could potentially allow us to modify or terminate his access based on client complaints and business ethics violations. We've never had to use those clauses before, but this might be exactly the kind of situation they were designed for." Sophia felt a surge of excitement as she realized that they might have more leverage than she had initially thought. "Janet, I want you to prepare a formal account review for Marcus, including documentation of his overdue balance, his pattern of late payments, and any client complaints you've received. I also want you to research our options under the professional conduct clauses in his rental agreement." "I can have that ready by tomorrow morning," Janet replied. "But Sophia, what exactly are you planning to do with this information?" Sophia stood up and walked over to the window that overlooked the main equipment storage area, where thousands of dollars worth of cameras, lenses, and lighting equipment were organized on custom-built shelving systems. She thought about Marcus somewhere in the city, probably congratulating himself on having intimidated another client into backing down from their reasonable demands for the services they had paid for. "Janet, Marcus made a serious mistake when he decided to delete my wedding photos," Sophia said, turning back to face the studio manager. "He assumed that I was powerless to do anything about his behavior. But what he doesn't realize is that he's completely dependent on this facility to run his business, and that gives us the power to ensure that he never treats another client the way he treated me." Over the next several days, Sophia and Janet worked together to compile a comprehensive dossier on Marcus's business practices and his relationship with Aperture Studios. They reached out to several other clients who had experienced problems with Marcus, documenting patterns of delayed delivery, poor communication, and, in some cases, threats similar to what Sophia had received. They also discovered that Marcus had been less than truthful about his business credentials. His website claimed that he was a member of several professional photography organizations, but when Janet contacted those organizations, she learned that Marcus's membership had lapsed months earlier due to non-payment of dues. His website also featured testimonials from clients that, upon investigation, appeared to be fabricated or significantly embellished. Most significantly, they learned that Marcus had recently been sued by another couple for failure to deliver wedding photographs, and that the case had been settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. This legal action had apparently been sealed under the terms of the settlement, which explained why it hadn't appeared in Sophia's initial research into Marcus's background. Armed with this information, Sophia felt confident that they had sufficient grounds to take decisive action regarding Marcus's account with Aperture Studios. But rather than simply terminating his access to equipment, which would have been the most straightforward approach, Sophia had developed a more strategic plan that would give Marcus an opportunity to make things right while also ensuring that justice was served. The plan was elegantly simple. Sophia would offer Marcus a choice. He could either deliver the wedding photographs he had claimed to delete, along with similar resolution for the other couples who had been affected by his unprofessional behavior, or he could lose access to Aperture Studios permanently and face potential legal action for his business practices. The beauty of this approach was that it leveraged Marcus's dependence on the studio's equipment to create consequences for his actions, while also providing a path for redemption if he was willing to take it. If Marcus genuinely had deleted the photographs as he claimed, then the loss of his equipment access would be the price he paid for his destructive behavior. But if the photographs still existed, which Sophia suspected they did, then her plan would pressure him to release them and resolve the damage he had caused to multiple families. On a gray Tuesday morning, exactly 2 weeks after receiving Marcus's devastating email, Sophia walked into Aperture Studios, carrying a folder containing Marcus's complete account history, documentation of his unprofessional behavior, and a carefully crafted ultimatum that would determine the future of his photography business. Janet was waiting for her in the conference room, along with David, who had taken time off work to support Sophia in this final confrontation. "Are you ready for this?" David asked, squeezing Sophia's hand as they reviewed their strategy one final time. "I've been ready since the moment I read his email," Sophia replied, thinking about all of the couples whose wedding memories had been held hostage by Marcus's greed and unprofessionalism. It's time for Marcus to learn that actions have consequences, and that some people aren't as powerless as he assumes they are. The call to Marcus came at exactly 9:30 on Tuesday morning, timed deliberately to catch him during what Janet's records indicated were his typical equipment pickup hours. Sophia had positioned herself in the conference room at Aperture Studios, with Janet and David flanking her for moral support, and a speakerphone that would allow all three of them to hear Marcus's responses to what was about to unfold. When Marcus answered his phone, his voice carried the casual confidence of someone who believed he had successfully intimidated another difficult client into submission. "Marcus Blackwood Photography. This is Marcus." "Hello, Marcus. This is Sophia Chen," she said, keeping her voice professionally neutral despite the anger that still burned in her chest whenever she thought about his callous treatment of their wedding memories. "I'm calling to discuss the situation with our wedding photographs, and to offer you an opportunity to resolve this matter before it escalates further." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Sophia could practically hear Marcus's mental calculations as he tried to determine whether this was another attempt to negotiate or something more serious. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted to one of barely concealed irritation. "Ms. Chen, I thought I made our situation very clear in my last email. Your photos were deleted due to non-payment, and that decision is final. If you want to discuss this further, you'll need to contact my attorney." Sophia exchanged glances with Janet and David, both of whom nodded encouragingly. They had anticipated that Marcus would try to maintain his aggressive stance, at least initially, and they were prepared for his bluster. "Marcus, I don't think you fully understand the position you're in," Sophia continued, consulting the file folder in front of her. "Before we discuss attorneys, I think you should know that I'm currently sitting in the offices of Aperture Studios, and I have some very interesting information about your account status and your business practices that I'd like to share with you." This time the pause was longer, and when Marcus spoke again, Sophia could detect the first note of uncertainty in his voice. "I don't know what you're talking about, and I don't appreciate whatever game you think you're playing. Aperture Studios is a professional equipment rental facility, and my relationship with them has nothing to do with you." "Actually, Marcus, that's where you're wrong," Sophia said, feeling a surge of satisfaction as she prepared to reveal the information that would shift the entire dynamic of their conflict. "I own Aperture Studios, and I've been reviewing your rental history and account status very carefully. I think you'll find that our conversation becomes much more productive once you understand the full scope of what I know about your business operations." The silence that followed this revelation stretched for nearly 30 seconds, long enough for Sophia to wonder if Marcus had hung up, or if the call had been dropped. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost all of its earlier confidence and aggression. "You're lying," he said, but the accusation lacked conviction. "There's no way you could own Aperture Studios. I would have known if one of my clients owned the equipment facility." Janet leaned forward toward the speakerphone and spoke for the first time since the call had begun. "Hello, Marcus. This is Janet Rodriguez from Aperture Studios. I can confirm that Sophia Chen has been the owner of this facility for the past 2 years, and that we've been conducting a comprehensive review of your account based on client complaints and concerns about your business practices." Another long silence followed, and Sophia could imagine Marcus frantically trying to process this new information and its implications for his business. She decided to press her advantage while he was still off balance. "Marcus, let me explain exactly what I know about your situation," Sophia continued, opening the file folder and consulting the detailed account summary that Janet had prepared. "You currently owe Aperture Studios $2,300 for equipment that was due back 3 weeks ago. You've had 7 late payments in the past 6 months, and you've requested payment extensions on multiple occasions. Most importantly, you have equipment reserved for 5 weddings over the next 2 weekends, which means you're completely dependent on this facility to fulfill your current client commitments. Marcus's breathing was audible over the phone connection, and Sophia could sense his growing panic as he realized the extent of his vulnerability. When he spoke again, his voice had taken on a pleading quality that was completely different from his earlier arrogance. Look, I don't know what you think you're accomplishing here, but threatening my business relationships isn't going to bring back photos that have already been deleted. What's done is done, and you can't change that by trying to interfere with my other clients. David gestured toward the speakerphone, and Sophia nodded, indicating that he should speak. Marcus, this is David Park, Sophia's husband. We're not trying to interfere with your other clients. We're trying to prevent you from treating other couples the way you've treated us. But more than that, we don't actually believe that you deleted our wedding photos. What are you talking about? Marcus demanded, his voice rising with what sounded like genuine indignation. Of course I deleted them. I told you I deleted them. Why would I lie about that? Sophia consulted another document in her folder, this one containing information that Janet had gathered about Marcus's storage and backup systems based on his equipment rental patterns. Marcus, according to your rental history, you've been renting backup drives and cloud storage equipment on a regular basis for the past year. Professional photographers don't typically delete valuable work product, especially not wedding photographs that represent significant time and artistic investment. We think you still have our photos, and we think you're using them as leverage to try to force payment under terms that weren't part of our original agreement. The accusation hung in the air for several moments before Marcus responded, and when he did, his tone had shifted once again, this time toward desperate justification of his actions. Even if I still had the photos, which I'm not saying I do, you still owe me money according to the terms of our contract. I can't run a business giving away my work for free just because clients decide they don't want to pay what they agreed to pay. Janet leaned forward again and consulted her own set of documents. Marcus, we've reviewed the contract that Sophia provided, and your demands for advance payment and additional fees are not supported by the terms that you and your clients agreed to. What you're describing sounds more like extortion than standard business practice. That's ridiculous, Marcus protested, but his voice lacked the conviction of someone who truly believed his own argument. I'm a professional photographer, and I have every right to set payment terms that protect my business interests. If clients don't like those terms, they can hire someone else. Sophia decided that it was time to reveal the full extent of what they knew about Marcus's business practices and the pattern of client abuse that extended far beyond her own situation. Marcus, we've been in contact with other couples who have experienced similar treatment from you. We know about the bride who couldn't reach you for weeks after her wedding. We know about the couple who had to threaten legal action to get their engagement photos. We know about the lawsuit that was settled out of court just 6 months ago. This final revelation seemed to break something in Marcus's composure, and when he spoke again, his voice was shaking with a combination of anger and fear. You have no right to investigate my business or contact my other clients. Whatever problems you think you found, they have nothing to do with your situation, and they don't give you the right to interfere with my livelihood. David spoke again, his voice calm but firm. Marcus, we're not trying to destroy your livelihood. We're trying to get you to honor the commitments you made to us and to stop treating couples like their wedding memories are expendable bargaining chips in your business negotiations. Sophia consulted the final document in her folder, the one that outlined the ultimatum they had prepared for Marcus. Marcus, here's what's going to happen. You have 48 hours to deliver our complete wedding photo gallery, edited and ready for download, along with written confirmation that you've resolved similar issues with the other couples who have complained about your services. In exchange, we'll work with you to resolve your outstanding account balance with Aperture Studios and allow you to continue renting equipment for your currently scheduled weddings. And if I refuse? Marcus asked, though his tone suggested that he already suspected what the answer would be. If you refuse, Sophia replied, your account with Aperture Studios will be immediately suspended, which means you won't be able to pick up the equipment you need for this weekend's weddings. We'll also be filing complaints with the Better Business Bureau, the professional photography associations you claim membership in, and any other relevant organizations. And we'll be consulting with our attorney about potential legal action for breach of contract and business fraud. The threat was comprehensive and devastating, and Marcus clearly understood its implications for his business. Without access to Aperture Studios' equipment, he would be unable to fulfill his current commitments, which would likely result in additional client complaints, potential lawsuits, and the complete destruction of his professional reputation. The legal and regulatory complaints would further damage his credibility and could potentially result in formal sanctions or license suspension. After another long pause, Marcus's voice returned to the line, now sounding defeated and exhausted. "You're basically trying to blackmail me into giving you something I don't have. Even if I wanted to deliver your photos, I can't give you something that's already been deleted." Janet reached across the table and handed Sophia a document that contained information they had discovered about Marcus's data management practices. "Marcus, this is interesting because according to your rental records, you checked out a high-capacity backup drive system just 2 days before you sent Sophia the email claiming that you had deleted her photos. Professional backup systems aren't typically rented for the purpose of deleting data." This piece of evidence seemed to be the final straw that broke Marcus's resistance to admitting the truth about the situation. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper, and the fight had gone out of his tone completely. "Look, I never actually deleted the photos, okay? I was just trying to get you to pay what you owed so I could cover my equipment costs and my other business expenses. Wedding photography is expensive to do right, and clients don't understand how much money I have to invest before I can even deliver their final products." The admission hung in the air for several moments as Sophia, David, and Janet processed the confirmation of what they had suspected all along. Marcus had been holding their wedding memories hostage, not because the photos didn't exist, but because he was facing financial pressures that he was trying to resolve at his client's expense. Sophia felt a complex mixture of relief and anger wash over her. Relief that their wedding photos still existed and could potentially be recovered, but anger that Marcus had put them through weeks of emotional trauma over what amounted to his own poor business management and unethical practices. "Marcus," Sophia said, keeping her voice steady despite the emotions she was feeling, "I need you to understand something very clearly. You've admitted that you lied about deleting our photos, which means you've been causing us emotional distress for weeks based on a deliberate deception. This goes far beyond a simple payment dispute, and it's exactly the kind of behavior that we cannot allow to continue." David nodded toward the speakerphone and added his own perspective. "Marcus, we understand that running a photography business is challenging, and that you have legitimate expenses to cover. But holding couples' wedding photos hostage and lying about destroying them is not an acceptable way to manage your cash flow problems." Marcus's response came quickly, with a note of desperation that suggested he was beginning to understand the full consequences of his actions. "I know it was wrong, okay? I know I shouldn't have said I deleted the photos. But I'm drowning in equipment costs and client demands, and I didn't know what else to do. Every wedding I shoot costs me thousands of dollars in equipment rentals before I can even edit a single image." Janet leaned forward and spoke directly to this concern. "Marcus, if you're having trouble managing equipment costs, there are better solutions than threatening clients and lying about destroying their photos. We work with photographers all the time to develop rental packages and payment plans that make high-end equipment more affordable for growing businesses." "But those conversations should have happened months ago," Sophia interjected, "not after you'd already committed to serving clients under terms that you apparently couldn't afford to honor. And they definitely shouldn't have involved lying to couples about destroying their wedding memories." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Marcus gradually revealing more details about his financial situation and his pattern of using client payment disputes to manage his cash flow problems. What emerged was a picture of a photographer who had been operating beyond his means for months, taking on more clients than he could afford to serve properly, and then using increasingly aggressive tactics to collect payments that would allow him to stay afloat financially. Marcus admitted that he had similar payment disputes with at least 6 other couples from recent weddings, and that he had been using the threat of deleting or withholding photos as a negotiating tactic to pressure clients into paying additional fees or accepting modified payment terms. He also acknowledged that his claims about standard industry practices and artistic integrity had been fabrications designed to justify his unreasonable demands. Perhaps most damaging to his credibility, Marcus revealed that he had never actually intended to delete any wedding photos, because he understood that doing so would expose him to serious legal liability. His threats had been calculated bluffs designed to exploit couples' emotional attachment to their wedding memories. But he had never expected to encounter a client who had the resources and connections to investigate his business practices thoroughly. By the end of the call, Marcus had agreed to deliver Sophia and David's complete wedding photo gallery within 24 hours, along with written documentation showing that he had resolved the similar disputes with his other affected clients. He had also agreed to participate in a formal review of his account status with Aperture Studios, and to work with Janet to develop a more sustainable approach to equipment rental that wouldn't require him to threaten clients in order to manage his costs. After hanging up the phone, Sophia, David, and Janet sat in the conference room for several minutes, processing the conversation and its implications. The immediate crisis had been resolved, with Marcus agreeing to deliver the wedding photos that Sophia and David had feared were lost forever. But the broader questions about Marcus's business practices and his treatment of other clients still needed to be addressed. I have to admit, I didn't expect him to fold that quickly once he realized you owned the studio, Janet said, organizing the documents they had used during the call. His whole aggressive persona seemed to evaporate the moment he understood that his threats could have real consequences for his business. David nodded, still looking somewhat stunned by the rapid resolution of a conflict that had been causing them stress for weeks. It's amazing how differently people behave when they realize that the person they're trying to intimidate actually has the power to affect their livelihood. Sophia felt a deep sense of satisfaction about the outcome, but she also recognized that their work wasn't finished. Janet, I want to make sure we follow through on helping Marcus develop a more sustainable business model. Not because I forgive him for what he put us through, but because I don't want other couples to go through this same experience. Over the next 24 hours, Marcus proved to be as good as his word about delivering the wedding photographs. The link to their online gallery arrived in Sophia's email exactly 18 hours after their phone conversation, accompanied by a formal apology that acknowledged his unprofessional behavior and expressed gratitude for the opportunity to make amends. When Sophia opened the gallery link and saw the first image from their wedding day, she felt tears come to her eyes for the first time since the crisis had begun. The photographs were everything she had hoped they would be, capturing not just the events of their celebration, but the emotions and connections that had made the day so special. Marcus's artistic eye and technical skill were evident in every frame, which made his destructive behavior even more difficult to understand. David joined her at the computer as they scrolled through hundreds of images from their wedding day. There were the formal portraits they had posed for during the photography session before the ceremony, candid shots of their families interacting during the cocktail hour, and intimate moments from their first dance and the traditional ceremonies that had honored both of their cultural backgrounds. "These are incredible," David said, pointing to a series of images that captured the moment when Sophia's grandmother had blessed their union during the Korean tea ceremony. "I can't believe he was willing to use these as bargaining chips in a payment dispute." Sophia found herself focusing on a photograph that showed her walking down the aisle toward David, her face radiant with happiness and anticipation. The image captured a moment of pure joy that she had feared was lost forever, and seeing it again reminded her of why the fight to recover these memories had been so important. "I think that's exactly why his behavior was so unethical," she replied. "He understood how emotionally significant these photos were to us, and he was willing to exploit that emotional attachment to get what he wanted financially. That's not business negotiation, that's emotional manipulation." Janet called later that afternoon to confirm that Marcus had also provided documentation showing that he had resolved the payment disputes with his other affected clients. According to the paperwork he had submitted, Marcus had delivered completed photo galleries to 3 other couples and had withdrawn his demands for additional fees or modified payment terms. "I also spoke with 2 of the couples directly," Janet reported, "and they confirmed that they've received their photos and that Marcus has apologized for the delays and communication problems. It seems like your approach was effective in resolving not just your own situation, but the broader pattern of client abuse." The resolution of the immediate crisis allowed Sophia to turn her attention to the longer-term questions about Marcus's business relationship with Aperture Studios, and the steps that should be taken to prevent similar situations in the future. While she was satisfied that Marcus had delivered on his commitments to resolve the client disputes, she was still concerned about the underlying financial problems that had led to his unethical behavior. Working with Janet, Sophia developed a comprehensive plan for restructuring Marcus's account with Aperture Studios that would address both his immediate financial challenges and the longer-term sustainability of his business model. The plan included a formal payment schedule for his outstanding balance, a restructured rental agreement that would provide more predictable equipment costs, and a probationary period during which his account would be subject to additional oversight and review. More importantly, the plan included requirements for Marcus to complete professional development courses in business ethics and client relations, and to provide regular reports on his client satisfaction and payment practices. The goal was not to punish Marcus indefinitely, but to ensure that he developed the skills and systems necessary to operate his business in a way that served his clients' interests as well as his own. "I want him to succeed as a photographer," Sophia explained to Janet during one of their planning sessions. "His work is genuinely talented, and Seattle's wedding photography community is better when it includes skilled professionals. But he needs to learn that talent doesn't excuse unethical behavior, and that sustainable business success requires treating clients with respect and honesty." The implementation of this plan required several weeks of detailed negotiations and documentation, but by the end of the month, Marcus had signed a new rental agreement with Aperture Studios that addressed both his financial challenges and his professional conduct. He had also enrolled in business ethics courses through a local small business development center and had agreed to participate in regular check-ins with Janet to monitor his progress and address any ongoing concerns. The resolution of Marcus's situation had broader implications for Aperture Studios' policies and procedures as well. Working with Janet, Sophia developed new screening protocols for rental clients that would identify potential red flags related to financial stability and professional conduct before problems could escalate to the level they had reached with Marcus. "We never want to be in a position where we're inadvertently enabling someone to mistreat their clients," Sophia explained to Janet as they reviewed the new policies. "Our equipment should be supporting ethical, professional photographers who are building positive relationships with their clients, not providing tools for people who want to hold wedding photos hostage." The new policies included requirements for professional references, more detailed financial disclosure for high-volume renters, and a formal process for investigating client complaints that might indicate problematic business practices. The policies also established clear consequences for rental clients whose business practices were found to be harmful to consumers or damaging to the photography industry's reputation. 3 months after the resolution of the Marcus situation, Sophia received an unexpected email that provided an interesting perspective on the longer-term effects of their intervention. The email was from a bride named Rebecca Torres, who had hired Marcus for her wedding just 2 weeks after his account restructuring with Aperture Studios had been implemented. "I wanted to thank you for whatever you did to improve Marcus Blackwood's business practices," Rebecca wrote. "I heard from another bride that he had been having problems with client communication and photo delivery, but my experience with him was completely professional and positive. He delivered our photos exactly when he promised, his communication was excellent throughout the process, and the quality of his work exceeded our expectations." Rebecca's email was followed by similar messages from 2 other couples who had worked with Marcus during the months following his account restructuring. All of them reported positive experiences that suggested Marcus had genuinely learned from the crisis and had made meaningful changes to his business practices. "It sounds like your approach actually worked," David observed when Sophia shared Rebecca's email with him. "Marcus didn't just resolve the immediate problems with your photos and the other couples. He actually seems to have changed the way he operates his business." Sophia felt a sense of vindication about the approach they had taken to resolving the conflict with Marcus. Rather than simply seeking revenge or trying to destroy his business, they had used their leverage to create consequences for his behavior while also providing a path for improvement and redemption. "I think the key was making it clear that his actions had real consequences, but also giving him the tools and support to do better," Sophia reflected. Destroying his business would have hurt the couples who had already hired him for future weddings, and it wouldn't have addressed the underlying problems that led to his unethical behavior in the first place. The success of their intervention with Marcus had also strengthened Sophia's commitment to supporting Seattle's creative community through her ownership of Aperture Studios. She worked with Janet to develop mentorship programs for emerging photographers, business development resources for growing studios, and industry best practices training that would help prevent the kinds of problems they had encountered with Marcus. We're in a unique position to influence the professional standards and business practices in Seattle's photography community, Sophia explained to David during one of their conversations about the future direction of Aperture Studios. I want to use that influence to create an environment where talented photographers can succeed financially while also maintaining the highest standards of client service and professional ethics. 1 year after the wedding photo crisis, Sophia and David hosted their first anniversary celebration at the same venue where they had been married. As they looked through the beautiful photographs that Marcus had ultimately delivered, surrounded by the same family and friends who had celebrated with them on their wedding day, Sophia reflected on the journey they had taken from crisis to resolution. The photos that Marcus had threatened to delete were now displayed in their home, printed and framed as lasting reminders of their special day. But more than just recovering their wedding memories, the experience had taught Sophia important lessons about the power of strategic thinking, the importance of standing up to unethical behavior, and the possibility of creating positive change even in difficult situations. I still can't believe that Marcus was willing to put us through all of that stress over a payment dispute that could have been resolved so easily if he had just been honest about his financial situation from the beginning, David said as they looked at their favorite wedding photographs. I think that's the most important lesson from the whole experience, Sophia replied. Honesty and communication could have prevented all of the drama and trauma. Marcus's financial problems were solvable, but his decision to lie and threaten clients turned a manageable business challenge into a crisis that nearly destroyed his professional reputation. As they prepared to cut their anniversary cake, surrounded by photographs that captured the joy and love of their wedding day, Sophia felt grateful, not just for the recovery of their memories, but for the opportunity to have made a positive difference in their community. Marcus continued to operate his photography business with the improved practices and ethical standards that had emerged from their confrontation, and other couples were benefiting from the changes that had been implemented. The wedding dress that Sophia had worn in the recovered photographs hung carefully preserved in their closet, waiting for a future daughter who might want to wear it on her own wedding day. And the jade bracelet that David's grandmother had given her, visible in several of the ceremony photos, had become a treasured family heirloom that connected their marriage to the generations of love and commitment that had come before them. But perhaps most importantly, the experience had taught both Sophia and David that sometimes the most difficult challenges can become opportunities for positive change, and that standing up for what's right can have effects that extend far beyond your own immediate situation. Marcus's transformation from an unethical businessman who threatened clients into a professional photographer who honored his commitments was proof that people could change when given the right incentives and support. As the anniversary celebration continued around them, Sophia and David looked at their recovered wedding photographs with a deeper appreciation for both the memories they contained and the journey they had taken to preserve them. The crisis that had begun with a devastating email about deleted photos had ultimately led to positive changes that would benefit countless other couples for years to come. 2 years later, Sophia stood in the main gallery space of Aperture Studios, watching as dozens of Seattle's most talented photographers mingled during the opening reception for Captured Moments, the studio's first annual exhibition celebrating ethical excellence in wedding photography. The walls were lined with stunning images from local photographers who had demonstrated not just artistic talent, but also the highest standards of professional conduct and client service. The exhibition had been Sophia's idea, developed in partnership with Janet and several other members of Seattle's creative community, who shared her vision of supporting photographers who understood that their work involved far more than just technical skill and artistic vision. The goal was to recognize and celebrate professionals who approached their craft with integrity, empathy, and a genuine commitment to serving their clients' needs and dreams. Marcus Blackwood stood near the center of the gallery, surrounded by a small group of admirers who were discussing one of his photographs that had been selected for inclusion in the exhibition. The image showed a moment of pure joy between a newly married couple, captured with the kind of technical precision and emotional sensitivity that had made Marcus's work so compelling even during his most difficult period. Watching Marcus interact with the other photographers and exhibition visitors, Sophia marveled at the transformation he had undergone since their confrontation 2 years earlier. The defensive, aggressive businessman who had threatened to delete wedding photos had evolved into a thoughtful professional who was now mentoring younger photographers and advocating for industry best practices. "It's remarkable how much he's changed," David observed, joining Sophia near the gallery's main entrance. "Remember how hostile and unreasonable he was during that phone call? Now he's leading workshops on client communication and business ethics." Sophia nodded, still amazed by the extent of Marcus's professional and personal growth. "I think the key was that we gave him consequences for his behavior, but we also gave him the tools and support to do better. A lot of people would have just tried to destroy his business out of anger, but that wouldn't have helped anyone." The exhibition opening was also serving as a launch event for the Seattle Wedding Photography Ethics Council, a new organization that Sophia had helped establish to promote professional standards and provide resources for both photographers and their clients. The council offered certification programs, dispute resolution services, and educational resources designed to prevent the kinds of problems that had characterized Marcus's earlier business practices. Janet approached them carrying 2 glasses of wine and wearing the satisfied expression of someone who had successfully coordinated a complex event. "Sophia, I think this exhibition is going to be even more successful than we hoped. I've already had 3 couples ask me for referrals to photographers whose work is displayed here, and several photographers have inquired about the council's certification program." The certification program had been one of Sophia's most ambitious initiatives, developed in collaboration with local photography schools, business development organizations, and consumer advocacy groups. Photographers who completed the program demonstrated proficiency not just in technical and artistic skills, but also in client communication, contract management, and ethical business practices. "I'm especially pleased that we've been able to create something that benefits both photographers and their clients," Sophia replied, watching as Marcus engaged in an animated conversation with a young photographer who was clearly seeking advice about building her business. The whole point was to raise the standards of the industry in a way that supports everyone's success. The evening's program included a panel discussion featuring several established photographers who would share their insights about building sustainable, ethical businesses in the competitive wedding photography market. Marcus had been invited to participate as a panelist, speaking specifically about the importance of honest communication and transparent business practices. As the panel discussion began, Sophia found herself thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. What had started as a personal crisis over deleted wedding photos had evolved into a community-wide initiative that was changing the way photographers approach their relationships with clients and with each other. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our panel on building trust through ethical practice," announced Dr. Sarah Kim, a business ethics professor from the University of Washington who was serving as the moderator. "Tonight we're going to hear from 4 photographers who have built successful businesses by prioritizing client service, transparent communication, and professional integrity." Marcus was the second panelist to speak, and as he stood to address the audience, Sophia noticed that his demeanor was completely different from the defensive, aggressive persona he had displayed during their conflict. He spoke with confidence but also with humility, acknowledging his past mistakes while sharing the lessons he had learned about the importance of honest client relationships. 2 years ago, I nearly destroyed my business because I was trying to solve financial problems by manipulating and threatening my clients, Marcus said, his voice steady and sincere. "I thought I could use couples' emotional attachment to their wedding photos as leverage in payment disputes, and I convinced myself that aggressive tactics were just part of being a tough businessman." The audience listened intently as Marcus described the crisis that had led to his transformation, though he was careful to protect Sophia's privacy by not identifying her by name or providing details that would compromise her personal story. "What I learned," Marcus continued, "is that sustainable business success requires building relationships based on trust and mutual respect. When you treat clients as adversaries instead of partners, you create problems that go far beyond any individual transaction. You damage your reputation, you hurt people who trusted you with their most important memories, and you ultimately sabotage your own long-term success." Marcus went on to describe the changes he had made to his business practices, including the implementation of clear communication protocols, transparent pricing structures, and comprehensive backup systems that ensured clients' photos were always protected. He also talked about the importance of seeking help when facing financial difficulties, rather than trying to solve problems by shifting costs and risks to clients. The photography community here in Seattle has been incredibly supportive of photographers who want to improve their business practices, Marcus explained. Organizations like Aperture Studios and the Ethics Council provide resources and mentorship that make it possible to build a successful business without compromising your integrity or taking advantage of your clients. During the question and answer portion of the panel, a young photographer raised her hand and asked Marcus about the specific steps he had taken to rebuild trust with clients and colleagues after his ethical lapses. "That's been the hardest part of the whole process," Marcus admitted. "Rebuilding trust requires consistent action over time, not just words or promises. I had to demonstrate through my behavior that I had genuinely changed, and that meant being completely transparent about my past mistakes and the steps I was taking to prevent them from happening again." Marcus described how he had implemented client feedback systems, regular business reviews with his mentor at Aperture Studios, and participation in continuing education programs that helped him stay current with industry best practices and ethical standards. "I also had to accept that some potential clients would choose not to work with me because of my past reputation," Marcus continued. "That was painful, but it was a natural consequence of my previous actions. The only way to move forward was to focus on serving my current clients exceptionally well and letting my improved practices speak for themselves." After the panel discussion ended, Sophia approached Marcus to congratulate him on his thoughtful presentation and to express her appreciation for his willingness to share his story in a way that could help other photographers avoid similar mistakes. "Marcus, I wanted to tell you how impressed I am with the changes you've made," Sophia said as they stood near one of his exhibited photographs. "When we had our confrontation 2 years ago, I wasn't sure whether you would be able to transform your business practices, but you've exceeded every expectation." Marcus smiled, but his expression remained serious as he considered her words. "Sophia, I owe you and David an enormous debt of gratitude. Most people in your situation would have simply tried to destroy my business out of anger, and they would have been justified in doing so. Instead, you gave me consequences for my behavior, while also providing a path for redemption. That approach saved my career and taught me lessons that have made me a better businessman and a better person." Their conversation was interrupted by a young couple who approached Marcus to inquire about his services for their upcoming wedding. Sophia listened as Marcus engaged with them in a way that was completely different from his previous approach to client relationships. He asked thoughtful questions about their vision for their wedding photography, explained his process and pricing with complete transparency, and focused entirely on understanding their needs rather than trying to manipulate them into accepting his preferred terms. "We've heard wonderful things about your work from several other couples," the bride-to-be told Marcus. "But more than that, we've heard that you're someone who really cares about your clients and goes above and beyond to make sure they're happy with their experience." Marcus's face lit up with genuine pleasure at this feedback. "That's exactly the kind of reputation I'm working to build," he replied. "Wedding photography is about so much more than just taking beautiful pictures. It's about being trusted with some of the most important moments in people's lives, and that's a responsibility I take very seriously." As Sophia watched this interaction, she reflected on the broader impact that their intervention had had on Seattle's wedding photography community. The Ethics Council had certified more than 50 photographers in its first year of operation, and client satisfaction surveys indicated that couples were having significantly better experiences with certified photographers compared to the industry average. The success of the certification program had also attracted attention from other cities, and Sophia had been invited to speak at conferences in Portland, San Francisco, and Denver about replicating the Seattle model in other markets. The goal was to create a national network of photography communities that prioritized ethical business practices and client service excellence. "I think we've proven that it's possible to raise industry standards without destroying opportunities for photographers," Sophia told David as they prepared to leave the exhibition opening. "The key is creating systems that reward good behavior, rather than just punishing bad behavior." The drive home took them through the same Georgetown neighborhood where Aperture Studios was located, and Sophia found herself thinking about all of the positive changes that had emerged from what had initially been such a devastating personal crisis. The studio was now serving as a model for ethical business practices in creative industries, and photographers from across the Pacific Northwest were seeking certification through the programs they had developed. More importantly, couples throughout the region were having better experiences with their wedding photographers, with fewer payment disputes, communication problems, and delivery delays. The industry-wide improvements meant that fewer couples would have to go through the kind of emotional trauma that Sophia and David had experienced when Marcus threatened to delete their wedding photos. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we had just accepted Marcus's behavior and paid his unreasonable demands? David asked as they pulled into their driveway. Sophia considered the question carefully. I think we would have gotten our photos back, but Marcus would have continued treating other couples the same way. And more broadly, we would have missed the opportunity to create positive change in an industry that really needed it. Sometimes standing up to unethical behavior requires more effort than just giving in, but the long-term benefits make it worthwhile. Inside their home, Sophia walked past the framed wedding photographs that now hung in their hallway, images that had once been held hostage in a payment dispute, but now served as beautiful reminders of their special day. The photos had taken on additional meaning through their recovery journey, representing not just their wedding memories, but also their successful fight for justice and positive change. The jade bracelet that appeared in several of the ceremony photos had been passed down to their daughter, Sophia Elena, who was now 18 months old, and showed early signs of inheriting her parents' determination and sense of justice. Sophia often wondered what kind of world Sophia Elena would grow up in, and she felt proud knowing that they had contributed to making at least one small corner of it more ethical and fair. As she tucked Sophia Elena into bed that evening, Sophia reflected on the lessons she hoped to pass on to her daughter about standing up for what's right, using privilege and resources to help others, and finding ways to create positive change even in difficult situations. The wedding photo crisis had taught her that individual actions could have broader community impact, and that sometimes the most important victories were the ones that benefited people beyond yourself. The final chapter of the Marcus situation had come 6 months earlier, when he had been selected to receive the Ethics Council's inaugural Excellence in Client Service Award. The recognition was based on client feedback, peer nominations, and his contributions to mentoring other photographers in ethical business practices. At the award ceremony, Marcus had given a speech that brought tears to many people's eyes as he described his transformation from someone who viewed clients as adversaries to someone who understood that client success was the foundation of business success. He had specifically thanked Sophia, though again without identifying her publicly, for giving him the opportunity to learn and grow rather than simply facing destruction. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the greatest challenges, Marcus had said in his acceptance speech. 2 years ago, I thought I was fighting for my business survival. What I was actually fighting for was the chance to become the kind of professional and person I should have been all along. Now, as Sophia prepared for bed, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction about the journey they had taken from crisis to resolution to transformation. The wedding photos that Marcus had threatened to delete were safely preserved in multiple formats and locations. But more importantly, the experience had led to systemic changes that would prevent other couples from facing similar threats. The Seattle Wedding Photography Ethics Council was thriving. Aperture Studios had become a model for ethical business practices in creative industries, and Marcus had evolved from a problematic businessman into a community leader who was actively working to improve professional standards throughout the industry. Looking ahead, Sophia was excited about expanding the Ethics Council's programs to include other creative professions, developing educational resources for consumers who wanted to make informed choices about service providers, and continuing to use her business platform to promote positive change in Seattle's creative community. The experience had taught her that sometimes the most effective response to injustice was not revenge or destruction, but rather the creation of systems and standards that prevented similar problems from occurring in the future. By focusing on positive change rather than punishment, they had been able to transform not just one problematic businessman, but an entire industry's approach to client relationships and professional conduct. As she turned off the lights and settled in for the night, Sophia smiled, thinking about all of the couples who were currently planning weddings with certified photographers who understood that their role involved much more than just taking beautiful pictures. These couples would never have to worry about their wedding photos being held hostage in payment disputes, because the photographers they hired had committed to ethical business practices and transparent communication. The crisis that had begun with a devastating email about deleted photos had ultimately led to positive changes that would benefit countless families for years to come, proving that sometimes the most difficult challenges could become opportunities for creating lasting positive impact in the world. The morning sun streamed through the conference room windows at Aperture Studios as Janet Rodriguez prepared for what would become one of the most unusual client meetings in the facility's history. She had been managing equipment rentals for creative professionals for over a decade, but she had never encountered a situation quite like the one that was about to unfold with Marcus Blackwood. Janet spread the rental records across the mahogany table, each document telling a story of increasing desperation and poor business decisions that had led to this moment. Marcus's account history painted a picture of a talented photographer whose artistic abilities had far exceeded his business acumen, creating a dangerous gap that had ultimately resulted in the destruction of client relationships and professional reputation. The irony of the situation was not lost on Janet. As someone who had worked closely with hundreds of photographers over the years, she understood the delicate balance that creative professionals had to maintain between artistic vision and business sustainability. Many of the most talented photographers she had known struggled with the practical aspects of running a business, but few had handled their challenges as poorly as Marcus had. Looking at the timeline of Marcus's rental history, Janet could see the exact moment when his business had begun to spiral out of control. 6 months earlier, he had suddenly increased his equipment rental frequency by over 300%, taking on multiple wedding assignments each weekend and renting gear that was far beyond what his client base could realistically support. The warning signs had been there from the beginning, but Janet had initially interpreted Marcus's increased rental activity as a positive sign of business growth. She had been pleased to see a young photographer building his client base and investing in high-quality equipment, even if he was doing so through rentals rather than purchases. It was only in retrospect that she could see how Marcus's rental patterns had actually indicated financial desperation rather than business success. The first red flag should have been Marcus's sudden shift from renting basic equipment packages to consistently requesting the most expensive cameras, lenses, and lighting systems available. Professional photographers typically built their equipment collections gradually, purchasing core items and renting specialized gear only for specific projects that required it. Marcus's pattern of renting premium equipment for every assignment suggested that he was trying to maintain an appearance of success that his actual revenue could not support. Even more concerning had been Marcus's payment behavior during this period of increased rental activity. While he had never been more than a few days late with payments in his early months as a client, his payment timing had become increasingly erratic as his rental volume increased. Janet had worked with him on several payment extensions, assuming that he was experiencing normal cash flow fluctuations that affected many small business owners. What Janet had not realized was that Marcus was using the flexibility she provided to create an unsustainable business model that depended on constantly acquiring new clients to pay for the equipment needed to serve existing clients. This pyramid-like approach to business finance had been doomed to failure from the beginning, but Marcus had managed to maintain it for several months before the inevitable collapse. The collapse had begun when Marcus started demanding advance payments from his wedding clients, a practice that violated standard industry protocols and immediately raised concerns among couples who had hired him. Wedding photography was a service industry built on trust, and clients expected to pay for completed work rather than funding photographers' operational expenses in advance. Janet had first learned about Marcus's client problems when a bride named Catherine Walsh had called Aperture Studios looking for information about Marcus's business status. Catherine had been unable to reach Marcus for several weeks after her wedding, and she was growing concerned about the delivery of her photographs. When Janet had asked about the situation, Catherine had described payment demands and communication problems that were completely inconsistent with professional photography standards. This conversation had prompted Janet to conduct a more thorough review of Marcus's account status and business practices. What she discovered had been deeply troubling and had led directly to the comprehensive intervention that Sophia Chen had ultimately orchestrated. The review had revealed that Marcus had been operating his business on borrowed time for months, using rental equipment that he could not afford, and serving clients under contract terms that he could not honor. His increasing desperation had led to increasingly aggressive tactics with clients, culminating in threats to delete wedding photos if couples did not agree to modified payment terms. From a business perspective, Marcus's approach had been completely irrational. Wedding photographs were his primary work product and his only source of revenue. Destroying them to pressure clients for payment was equivalent to a manufacturer destroying their inventory to force customers to pay for products they had not yet received. The strategy was not only unethical, but also economically self-destructive. Janet had seen many photographers struggle with the business aspects of their profession, but she had never encountered anyone who was willing to destroy their own work product out of frustration with clients. The revelation that Marcus had been using wedding photos as leverage in payment disputes had convinced her that immediate intervention was necessary to protect both Marcus's remaining clients and the broader reputation of Seattle's photography community. The intervention process had required careful coordination between Sophia, Janet, and several other stakeholders who were committed to resolving the situation in a way that served everyone's interests. The goal had been to create consequences for Marcus's behavior, while also providing him with the resources and support needed to operate his business ethically and sustainably. Working with Sophia to develop the intervention strategy had been one of the most challenging and rewarding projects of Janet's career. As a studio manager, she was accustomed to dealing with equipment rentals and payment issues, but she had never been involved in a comprehensive effort to transform a photographer's business practices and professional conduct. The key insight that had guided their approach was recognizing that Marcus's client abuse was a symptom of deeper financial and operational problems, rather than a fundamental character flaw. While his threats to delete wedding photos were inexcusable, they were also evidence of someone who was drowning in financial pressure and did not know how to manage his business sustainably. This understanding had led to the development of a rehabilitation plan that addressed both Marcus's immediate financial crisis and his longer-term need for business education and professional development. Rather than simply terminating his equipment access and leaving him to fail completely, they had created a structured program that would help him learn to operate his business in a way that served his clients' interests as well as his own. The implementation of this plan had required several months of intensive oversight and support, but the results had exceeded everyone's expectations. Marcus had not only resolved his immediate client conflicts, but had also developed into one of Seattle's most ethical and professional photographers. The transformation had been so complete that Marcus was now serving as a mentor to other photographers who were struggling with similar business challenges. He regularly spoke at industry events about the importance of transparent communication, honest pricing, and sustainable business practices. His evolution from a client abuser to a community leader had become a powerful example of the possibility for positive change, even in the most difficult circumstances. Janet often reflected on the lessons she had learned from the Marcus situation as she worked with other photographers who were building their businesses. The experience had taught her to pay closer attention to rental patterns that might indicate financial distress, and to intervene earlier when she noticed signs of unsustainable business practices. More importantly, the situation had demonstrated the value of approaching business problems with a focus on education and support rather than simply punishment. While Marcus's behavior had been unacceptable and had required immediate consequences, the long-term solution had involved helping him develop the skills and systems needed to operate his business ethically and successfully. The Marcus case had also led to the development of new policies and procedures at Aperture Studios that were designed to identify and address potential problems before they could escalate to the level of client abuse. These policies included financial screening for high-volume renters, regular check-ins with photographers who showed signs of business distress, and referral programs to business development resources in the community. The success of these interventions had attracted attention from equipment rental facilities in other cities, and Janet had been invited to share her experiences at several industry conferences. The goal was to create a network of rental facilities that could serve as early warning systems for problematic business practices in the photography industry. Looking back on the entire experience, Janet felt proud of the role that Aperture Studios had played in transforming not just Marcus's business practices but also the broader professional standards in Seattle's wedding photography community. The facility had evolved from simply providing equipment rentals to serving as a force for positive change in the creative community. The ethical photography certification program that had emerged from the Marcus situation was now serving as a model for similar initiatives in other cities, and photographers throughout the Pacific Northwest were seeking certification as a way to demonstrate their commitment to professional excellence and client service. As Janet prepared for another day of equipment rentals and client consultations, She felt optimistic about the future of Seattle's photography community. The Marcus situation had proven that even the most difficult business challenges could be opportunities for positive change when approached with creativity, collaboration, and a commitment to serving everyone's long-term interests. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.